I mean, I think my favourite headline at the time was Shottingham. But then I'm quite into puns. It's quite a good pun, don't you think? And it was even discussed that the failure of Nottinghamshire Constabulary to tackle it would mean that the Home Office would take over direct control of Nottinghamshire Constabulary. That's how bad it was. And all the cops were on overtime. There was literally shooting every day happening. Every day, just about every day. Yeah, it was extraordinary. Shootings, not necessarily have people dying or being maimed every day, but there were gunshots every day. So it was really tense, and that was the reason I was sent into that area, really, because it was needed to try and do something to infiltrate and find some intelligence. Now, my target wasn't necessarily Colin Gunn directly. That was a little bit above my low-level style of undercover work. But there was lots of pressure on me to get intelligence about what was going on. So I think the job just took over 6 months. I spent a long time getting to know people.
Where do you start?
Well, when you're working undercover, you need people to manipulate. And the easiest people to manipulate are vulnerable people. It's a brutal truth of undercover work, absolutely. But also vulnerable people, they tend to have the most connections because they're using more drugs than other people. So I picked on this one guy, Cammy. I picked on a few, but this particular guy was perfect for my purposes because he was a user dealer, so problematic heroin user, dealing bits as a runner, and he was on bail for dealing. But he was the lower end of that organisation, Gunn's organisation. That's where his drugs were coming from. So he was perfect. And I spent ages wooing him, really. Just befriending him. And what I tend to call it nowadays when I look back is that I was weaponizing empathy, because I was all the time I was trying to learn about the people I was around, and that's how to be successful, to learn about the people. But
so when you say wooing him, you just walk up to him and approach him and say something.
Yeah.
How do you initiate that?
Well, I mean, I was presenting myself as a heroin consumer.
So you ask, where can I buy some smack?
That's always your opening line, isn't it?
Is it?
Yeah, it's got to be, because it's the normal conversation. It's quite normal to talk about heroin if you are really keen on heroin. So I'd say, look, I'm looking for bees. Are you looking for bees? And I look at his eyes and say, yeah, you're ready, aren't you? Because when you're rattling or you come down with heroin, your pupils are big. And if you've just had some, they're tiny. So it makes for an easy conversation. Like, are you ready to score? You're looking to score. I've only got 5 of you want to share a bag. Do you want to split one? And suddenly you're in the same kind of realm, and you can start talking about.
So they're checking your pupils out then?
Yeah.
And if you've not taken the drugs, how are you adapting that with your pupils?
Well, I bet my pupils look big now, despite that light, because adrenaline or PTSD or various things will make your pupils go bigger than normal, or LSD will, But heroin does the opposite. It makes it go small.
I've seen that, in prison.
Yeah. So for the most part, I probably constantly looked like I was rattling, to be honest. It might have been one of my advantages. I don't know, but it's easy to make that kind of conversation as long as you know how to talk that way, and you learn to talk that way with empathy, and you learn from the people around you. So I got to know him quite well, and he was a really nice guy, Cammy, really, really nice. Like most problematic heroin users are, to be honest. He was clearly dealing with some kind of childhood trauma, like almost all problematic heroin users are. In fact, academic evidence says that 2/3 of problematic heroin users are self-medicating for some kind of childhood trauma, either physical, sexual abuse, or neglect. So he was clearly in that field. And I spent time with him. We went shoplifting together, actually, which is really good fun. Shoplifting, it really is, though, especially if there's 2 of you and you can take it in turns to be lookout. And I remember, actually, one of the things I got away with was which was always a great challenge, is, you know, in the real commodity to steal then, electronic commodity, was PlayStation memory cards. Now, people nowadays might not even remember what they are or know what they are, but they're basically a memory card which would give you extra memory for a PlayStation. And they'd be a real tradable commodity. But you went in Dixon's or Curry's, I think it was Curry's in where it was, they always had a little magnetic sticker on. So you'd have to distract the staff or take them somewhere else in the store to peel the sticker off. And sometimes they're really difficult, especially if you bite your nails like I do. So they're really difficult to peel off. But that was good fun because, you know, there was a bit more effort involved. And it's like once I peeled the magnetic sticker off and stuck it to a woman's back, which I know was a little bit mischievous of me. But I just got taken with the moment. But on
that subject, if you're an undercover cop and you steal something, at the end of the day, do you have to give it back?
Well, yes. Because, yes, eventually, yeah. Because theft, the definition of theft is to appropriate something with the intention of permanently depriving that person of it. My intention legally was never to permanently deprive them of it, because my intention would always be eventually that from the evidence, it would eventually go back to the store, plus any compensation if necessary for the fact that we had it so long. So it's all about the intent. So I could do it legally. Not so the poor people that I was with who, if they got caught, they were shafted, essentially.
So you've made an association with this guy at street level, and how do you expand it out from that?
Well, my intent was always to get him to introduce me to other people. So the conversations I would have with him were, the brown we were buying off Hoops or Daz or whoever, it's not bad, but I really fancy a better connect. Because if you've got someone who is dealing to the regional or local handful of street dealers, they're a step up, and the street dealers are going to skim it slightly. They'll make they'll make it go further, so a 10 wrap's slightly smaller. So there's value in wherever you are in the market. There's value in being further up the ladder, isn't it? You get better quality, better deals. So that's the way I would start talking. I could do with a better connect. What about this guy? You tell me about this guy. Would he be safe? Would it be all right to get introduced to? And that's how I'd get all my information about. He'd tell me the whole story about this guy, what happened to him. And actually, this guy Stitz, as I call him in the book, who was the guy I wanted to get introduced to because he was close to gun. I remember Cammy telling me, "Oh, you ever guess what happened to Stitz yesterday? Because he actually really likes knifing people." And that's the reputation he had. He's really into slashing people with his knife. Everyone has to have a hobby, but that was his. And but this got to be so problematic that apparently Colin Gunn snatched him off the street. This is one of his own dealers, lieutenant, snatched him off the street, took him to the middle of a field out of the city, made him strip naked, stuck a shotgun in his mouth, pulled the triggers back and said, "You need to stop being so handy with that blade." And he's like, okay. And that was the threat for drawing too much attention to himself. This is the man who's at war with everyone and shooting people, but apparently that was the tightener he gave him.
We have a quick question then before we get to gone. You've made friends now with this low-level person, and you've gone out shoplifting, and you've scored your dope. Doesn't that person then want to see you take those drugs in front of them?
Well, that's always a challenge to not be doing that, because I never had to do heroin, never used it. That would scare the hell out of me, if I'm honest. But I would say that I would talk about my habit being quite small. I would just be doing it mostly like in the evening. I would take tolerance breaks off, and people do that. It's quite reasonable, because believe it or not, only 25% of heroin use is problematic. We have this image of anyone who uses heroin is an addict. That's what the media puts out. That's what everyone understands it. The sort of one smoke and you're addicted for life idea. It's loads of bollocks, really. It's people who have a problem with emotional difficulties that have that problem. I mean, 90% of drug use is non-problematic. It's just that problematic heroin use is much higher than other drugs, but it's still only 25%. So I could talk in terms of, I'm taking a tolerance break, mate. You know, I've been caning it a bit, or I'm only going to do it in the evening, or so that I could do that. But there were times through my career when people were suspicious. Someone once insisted in Brighton that he give me a blowback because I said, well, I'm doing mine later. He says, no, you're having a blowback.
So what is a blowback?
So blowback is when someone generally cane to whole 10 wrap in one smoke, one toot on the foil, and then blows it into someone else and they have it from them. So I went into this toilet and I said, yeah, all right, yeah, no worries. Inwardly terrified, but I said, yeah, whatever, good idea. And he blew it, and I sort of looked like I was inhaling, and I did the Bill Clinton, I just didn't inhale. And I'm just thinking, please don't notice all this smoke going out the side of my mouth because I'm not inhaling it. And he didn't. He was quite satisfied. So that got me out of a bit of a sticky hole, really.
Well, that's a striking difference between what I was used to, because I was in rave culture, I wasn't in heroin culture. But rave culture, after parties, you know, everyone's passing around the plate of ketamine, or they're all on ecstasy, massaging each other. There's the rituals and the use that are part of that. It's like inherent. But you're saying that in heroin and crack culture, you could just get away with saying, you know, I just go in the toilet at nights and do my bit, but right now I'm abstaining, blah, blah, blah. You could get away with that in that culture. Yeah,
well, you have to remember, people who have a real problem with heroin and crack, they are the most marginalised people in our society, generally. And they have to live on the streets because that's where they exist. So that actually makes it sort of easier to get away with not using drugs, because, you know, dealers don't want to be hanging around in one place to be spotted. If a dealer's suspicious, then you can fob them off one way or another, because they really are not keen on hanging around watching you toot some heroin. I did have one. I don't think this got into the book actually, because it's one of the things that I recall later. But there was a time on the Nottinghamshire job where someone was. I got the hint that somebody was suspicious, and you know, sometimes it's the slightest hint. The guy that was with me, who'd introduced me to the dealer, was sat in a car, because I was driving a car at this point in this job. He was sat on my left, and the dealer had got in the back seat to deal and passed it between the seats. Now, I knew there was great risk if the suspicion festered. So what I did is I cooked up, because I'd watched it happen plenty of times, and I knew how to do it, and I practiced it. So
what is the procedure to cook up?
So I had my spoon. I'd got a little bottle of water, sterile water, put it in the spoon, tiny bit of citric, and I put a third of the wrap in,